It's been far too much manga and anime out of me lately, and in the theme of spooky season, I thought I'd cover a few indie comics on my channel again. Klaus, a guy I recently discovered when he launched his new campaign for Terror in the Trenches Volume 1. As it turns out, this guy had a couple of comics to his name, and I also picked up Monster MD while I was at it. And in doing the script for this video, I kept finding more and more of this man's work, and damn, this hole keeps getting deeper. Look, if I've learned anything out of all of this, it is that there absolutely are some people I will simp for, and this is one of those occasions. So let's go in chronological order and start with Monster MD. This comic follows Dr. Wyatt Black, a failed medical student turned quack for cryptids, and his lovely invisible assistant, Heidi. Using a beaten down RV as their mobile operation table, the two go around providing medical aid to all the monsters that occupy the dark spaces under your bed and in your closet. Things go a bit sideways when the two stumble on something out of Wyatt's past that makes him question whether or not he actually wants to continue on playing doctor for a bunch of monsters. The subsequent pages then force him to either choose to face the danger head on and deal with the monster of all monsters, or give up on the life entirely and go back to living normally as a disgraced medical student. The story on this one is very solid. It's well-paced, effective, and overall enthralling. It isn't just the doc and his assistant who come with their own fun personalities. The monsters themselves prove to have some level of charm and development as well. It's a satisfying blend of humanity and monstrosity in characters, lending to it having a level of comedy that I just didn't expect out of a series loaded with monsters and cryptids and themed after horror. Well Blended really does just about sum this up, because in terms of genre blend and character blend, it's really well done. Comedy, a bit of romance, and horror all in the same book? Yep, sure, sign me up. I'm not even that big of a fan of the horror genre, but this book really is just good. The dialogue is fun and loaded with banter that's both witty and enjoyable to read, and still manages to avoid doing the MCU snark while telling you a story that is both serious and has actual stakes to it. But there's another level to this creation that I really love. This book comes with the artwork of Marco Maccani and the coloring work of Tanya Wicker, which makes this book even more of a fantastically fun first step into the world of indie. I said in my review of the Rippaverse that I wasn't very fond of the art style used in the books. I prefer things that are a bit more stylized and cartoonish, and this one satisfies that preference with artwork that's far more to my taste. So not only does this comic read well, but it looks good to me too. I'm not particularly fond of the hyper-realistic kind of artwork that some comics demonstrate. To me, it either feels boring or weird, and it can prevent me from really falling in love with a comic if the artwork just doesn't do it for me. This one sort of hits the place where the stylization is just right for me. It's not too stylized, and it's not too realistic. For example, as much as I love him and I think he's a great artist, George Alexopoulos does faces in a kind of weird way that I don't know how I feel about. But this book looks very, very professional and clean and fun. It lends to the overall atmosphere of cartoonish comedy and gives it a good visual appeal, helping to keep the craziness framed in a realm of cartoonishness that keeps it from being a little bit too serious and also lending some believability to its ridiculous powers and monsters. So overall, it's a mostly positive experience with this one. Mostly. I had one major problem with this book, and it's the fact that right in the middle of the book, there seems to be a printing error with it, where two sections of the book, not just one, but two, end up repeating themselves back to back. The repeated material makes up about 10 pages, and honestly, it just feels like one big mistake generated by a failure to check over the whole comic before it was printed. Seriously, I've scanned over the book multiple times now, and I can't find a reason in the story for why this gets repeated. Why these two sections back to back get looped. And while it does give me a few questions about quality control, other than that, I have no complaints. The material, the artwork, and the story are great. I think this is an 8 out of 10 comic. And it would have easily been closer to 10 if it didn't have that massive error right in the middle of the book. Alright, one down, one to go. And that pushes us on to the second of the books I'm going over in this video, Terror in the Trenches, Volume 1. Right off the bat, I really love this cover. I do. But it's not just this, it's the contents of the book that's great too. Dr. Robert Benton is a former Special Forces officer who fought in World War II. After putting away his weapons, he now works helping other veterans with their prosthetics. At least until some unhinged exhibitionist decides to suicide bomb his clinic. This unfortunately catapults Benton back into the life of terror-inducing trench warfare that gave him his infamous moniker, the Black Terror. Using biochemical enhancements, he's bulletproofed his body to make himself into a superhuman killing machine hell-bent on carving up a new wave of, apparently I can't say this word on YouTube, so they're super not-so-good guys. But this new wave knows him better than he'd like, and they know how to fight him. He might not be alone, but there are plenty of enemies coming for his head this time around, and it won't be easy to end this battle. One of the things I like about this is that right off the bat, you get the sense that this book just doesn't have any chill. It's carnage in combat just about cover to cover in this high-speed, action-packed rush to carve up some super not-so-good guys. It's also interesting to me that all the hero characters don't carry very heroic-sounding names. I mean, that much gets explained by the fact that they get their names from their enemies rather than their allies, but hey, that's not really all that important right now. With some rather interesting twists to some rather commonplace powers like telekinesis and fear-inducing toxins, the story manages to use some rather bland powers in a way that feels a whole lot more exciting. I mean, when one of your characters is a literal telekinetic gun witch, you got me hooked right off the bat. Take the interesting powers, then add it on top of the fact that this story is pretty much just an action movie put into comic book pages, and voila, you have a great, entertaining comic. There's also a bit of an interesting dynamic going on between the two characters who are featured as the heroes in this story, with Benton being a far more serious character who's focused on eliminating the not-so-good guys, and thus giving the series a more gritty and brutal tone since he is the main character that this one follows, while Lady Satan, yeah, remember how I mentioned that their names don't exactly sound like heroic things, provides a bit of comic relief. Either way, it keeps a fairly fast pace as it pushes towards the central conflict and ultimately ends on a cliffhanger. And the artwork, done by Monica McConney, has this sort of blend between fun cartoonishness and horror that really makes it pop to me. It carries a lot of the traces of the old superhero cartoons I used to watch growing up, while also not making it look super dumbed down or stupid. The stylization, again, is fantastic. It really hits home, capturing that sort of gritty war story aesthetic while also still making things look fun and visually appealing without being hyper-realistic. It adds a touch more realism in some areas than the last one, but that's just on certain pages and for certain additional art sections. And it's another 8 out of 10 from von Klaus. I rate this one about the same as the last for 2 reasons. Firstly, there was an instance where the boundaries of my imagination couldn't reconcile some of the information that was being presented about the terror gas. Namely, the fact that it affects Benton differently than it affects everyone else in the world. And the second reason is just petty, but it's the fact that it ends on a cliffhanger. And I hate cliffhangers. Look, I might not have all that much experience in the comics and indie world, but right now, this man has made it to my S-tier list of creators. I love his stuff. His obsession with horror and monsters isn't necessarily my thing, but his creations are fun to read and satisfying to look at, so I will continue throwing money at this guy like I'm someone lonely and there's a potentially single lady on Twitch. And if you haven't checked out this man's work, I highly recommend that you do. He's fantastic. And he just dropped new info on his new book that will be coming out in the near future. It's called Kitaru Witch Hunter, and you can go check it out on Indiegogo. Pre-orders aren't live yet, but the campaign is still there to find. If the trend of Klaus being an absolute legend and dropping straight bangers continues, I wouldn't expect to be disappointed, and I would highly recommend you don't miss out on this. Why is it that the more I look into this man, the more I realize he's got loads of projects I've never heard of or seen? This dude seems incredibly prolific. Seriously though, this man deserves some love and respect, so go check out his stuff. But that's enough out of me. If you liked the video, please consider taking some free actions and hitting the like button and potentially subscribing if you like this video. Also, you can go down and comment. It just takes a little bit of work. You just got to work your fingers there and give me some thoughts if you have some to share. Anyway, thanks for your time. Hope you have a great day. Later.